You have more leverage than you think because who's going to sew us up? You can hire another writer a lot sooner than you can go hire someone who's been trained for 8 years to like be all up inside my uterus.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's exciting for me to see things like nurses' strikes and to hear that, at least in some cases, when you assert that power, you force the hand of the people in power to come correct. And honestly, sometimes to wake them up, you got to walk away.
Yo, what's good, everyone? It is Dr. Nee, host of Docs Outside the Box. Remember, this is a podcast where we are fusing money, medicine, and pop culture. And I'm joined by Dr.
Renee. Love it.
How much longer are you going to keep this up, this song and dance
We're going to keep going till we can't go no more. We're just going to keep going.
You're doing the same thing over and over and over again.
Okay, I'll scat again then.
Nah, don't scat, please. Please
Okay,
don't.
Scooby-Doo-Bop. Dr. Renee, Scooby-Doo.
All right.
Okay.
But everybody, welcome back. We're excited to talk to y'all. Listen, we got a lot planned. In this episode, this is episode 349, we're going to be talking about negotiations, which is one of our money traps. That's money trap number 10. Number 10. Yes. And basically the thought process of leaving money on the table, not negotiating, not knowing that you have leverage. But before we get into that, we got quite a few things before we get into that topic. We got some housekeeping, some fun things that we want to chat about. Notably, let's start with some of the textful comments. So Dr. Love wrote in about one of the comments.
His name is actually Love, so he's not just like Dr. Love.
Yeah, so
and we're not talking about that little boy in Florida neither.
No, this is actually a real doctor.
Alfred, you know what to do.
So that relationship between me and Alfred, that's me and Alfred. Like
it's done.
You can't. What do you call it?
It's done. Alfred has. You know what's really funny? I thought about the other day about Alfred. You always wanted to be Batman. You always want to be Alfred. Yeah, you always wanted to be Batman, and now you have your own Alfred. Look at you.
I don't think so. Anyway.
Batman.
So Renee's ADD aside, let's jump into this comment from Love Anani, Dr. Love Anani, emergency medicine doctor extraordinaire, the man.
Yes.
He wrote in, and I guess he says, what did he say?
What'd he say?
Wait, where's his comment at? I can't even find his comment.
What'd he say? Hurry. What did he say?
Ooh, I can't find his comment.
What do you mean? Did you?
Oh, you know what? He texted me. That's what it is.
Oh, he didn't text you
he's
on
got
your,
me. So me and Dr. Love, he's got my real text number, my real phone number, and he said, yo, we went in pretty hard on Kyrie.
Yeah.
So let me clarify the comments on Kyrie real quick before we move any further. It's not that I don't think Kyrie is a great basketball player. Kyrie is an amazing basketball player.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, let me just be very clear. I think that there are different tiers of basketball players. Mm-hmm. There are your average basketball player. Then there is above average basketball players. Mm-hmm. Then you have all-stars, you have stars, and then you have superstars.
My goodness.
And actually for superstars, I think that there's only maybe 3, possibly 4 superstars in the league, right? That's LeBron, Giannis, KD. I don't know who else I can fit in that. I think everybody else outside of those 3 players are all stars. And what I mean by that is that they are so great that they can pull their team, no matter what they have, they can pull them to the next level, to a championship. They are transcendent. Steph Curry. Steph Curry's a superstar. So that's number 4. Sorry.
Okay.
Right? But everybody else, I think for the most part, falls into star or lower. I think Kyrie is a star.
Okay.
He's put in a lot of work. He is amazing. But I think that he's someone who elevates and thinks of himself as a superstar, right? Okay. Mainly because he just thinks that he's better than everybody else, which is, that's fine. That's part of the whole, je ne sais quoi, the whole like swagger of being
he should have been a surgeon.
Of being but he probably is like an equivalent of a surgeon. He's just an above average surgeon or a star average. He's not like a superstar, right? Like he doesn't do all that's necessary to win. And his type of play has been shown multiple times prior to LeBron getting there that it doesn't equate to winning. And then obviously after he left LeBron, that his style of play still doesn't equate to winning.
So then how does KD get on the list of superstar?
But okay, so listen. But listen, there's only really one player who I listed who I think really is above and beyond everybody else. It's just that he's so old now, he's fallen back to the pack, which is LeBron, right? Like, we've never seen anybody like that before.
Okay.
But yeah, I think KD gets a pass also. KD's the same thing. He's purely not purely, but for the most part, he's a mostly offensive player, right? And his jump shot and all these different things, they're beautiful. So I think a lot of people fall in love with that. But if I need KD to get a stop, to do some type of defensive effort or to put on and defend the best player, he ain't going to do that. That's not his game. Okay. Or I need an assist or I need all these different things outside of scoring. He's not going to be able to do that. There's not many players who can do that, right? So, yeah, in a lot of ways, I think KD gets a pass. But I think Kyrie gets a mad pass, right? Because I think when we look at things in terms of win-loss, when we look at things in terms of who we compare to Michael Jordan, it all comes down to win-loss. It all comes down to championships.
Okay.
But Kyrie is the only person that will make excuses for him and be like, he's the most skilled he's the most best offensive player. But he doesn't win. So why are we willing to give him a pass? But anybody else, it's like, well, they haven't won championships. But Kyrie doesn't get put in that same. He doesn't get critiqued that same way. That's all the reason why I was given. Saying. That's all I'm saying. So Kyrie is great. Second year and third year residents are great, but there's just a sense of entitlement I think that they have, right? Because oftentimes they made it out of the most arduous
trenches of the first
year. The most arduous portion of their training, and now they are able to just kind of do what they've. What people want to do, which is operate and so forth. And they get to make some decisions. Shit rolls downhill, so to speak, so they can blame somebody else.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying, guys.
All right. So, enough about Kyrie.
Yeah.
More housekeeping.
So other housekeeping is by the time this episode comes out, this may be happening right now, is junior doctors in England are going to strike.
Ooh.
And according to BBC News, junior doctors to strike in England on the 13th to 15th of March. Look how they put the dates first. March 13th to the 15th, right?
So, okay.
So it says they want a pay increase to make up for 15 years of inflation. The BMA, which is the British Medical Association, says junior doctors have been left with no choice after the health secretary, quote unquote, refused to attend the meeting to negotiate on pay. Downing Street said the strike action was, quote unquote, disappointing, and Steve Barclay had recently met the union to discuss what was fair and affordable. The 3-day strike, starting and finishing at 7, will see junior doctors walk out of both routine and emergency care. But by law, they can only withdraw from life and limb emergency care if the NHS has found other staff to cover for them. So basically, guys, junior staff or junior doctors are the equivalent of residents.
Right.
They account for about 40% of the medical workforce in England, and nearly 48,000 junior doctors working across hospitals and in community were eligible to vote in a recent strike ballot, with more than 36,000 voting for action.
That's scary.
Wow. So some of the junior doctors said we're left with no option but to proceed with this action. Very, very interesting. Some of them, I think that I kept reading. If you keep going down the rabbit hole, a lot of them are saying that they haven't had a pay increase in close to 10, 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's,
wow.
It's, there's some, I'm not saying that none of this stuff is warranted, but it's just a very interesting.
Yeah. That's pretty drastic. 10 to 15 years with no pay increase. And things just get more and more expensive, as the years go by. So, yeah, that's pretty scary. Hopefully they can resolve it before March 13th, but...
You said the last time junior doctors went on strike was in 2016.
Wow.
That's actually pretty recent.
Yeah, that's very recent, actually.
It says
27 years ago.
During the 2016 strike, consultants stepped in. So consultants are the same as attendings.
Attendings, yeah.
Stepped in, but this meant a huge amount of pre-planned treatments, such as knee and hip replacements, had to be canceled. So
right. So they're backing away from like the elective stuff or the routine care stuff. But if they're going to back away from emergency care, it sounds like they have to have somebody to cover them.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So, guys, if you remember from our previous episode, or I can't remember which number it was, but when we were talking about Stanford residents are unionized and we discussed the pros, the cons.
Episode 345.
So we discussed that and we were able to delineate, well, why does it make sense to unionize? And what is the environment in residency different versus the environment as an attending? And you were able to really do a good job explaining that, hey, the main difference is that this is an educational experience. Right. So there's a lot of, or for the most part, this is a situation where they can't really decide. They don't have any choice, so to speak. They go into a match program, and then you're going to this one place, and there's really nothing to negotiate outside of there. You can't negotiate anything.
You can't negotiate. Yeah.
So in that sense, a union makes a lot of sense. Whereas once you become an attending, it becomes a little bit more difficult. I think there's many arguments that you can make, a lot of pros that you can say for starting a union when you become an attending, but I think definitely it's a closed shut case for when you are a resident. And, one of the things that we discuss is leverage. We talk about negotiation, and that makes a difference in terms of what's going to be the first salary that you have.
Yeah.
And according to the studies that we have, particularly if you're a woman, if you don't ask for what you want to get over the lifespan of about a 20 to 30 year career, we're talking about a $2 million difference between you and your male counterparts. Yeah. And, in that same study, it says that, well, listen, the biggest disparity actually is in starting salary when attendings first start out. And then as they get further in their career, that difference in pay decreases, but it's still...
But you've lost so much over the years. Yeah, you've lost so much over the years. And that's, that's why we're talking about negotiating in terms of, or not negotiating in terms of being a money trap, because how much money are you actually leaving on the table when you don't negotiate your salary? It's one thing, like you said, as residents, who have very limited ability to negotiate, except for when they are unionized. But it's another thing that when you're attending and you actually have the leverage to negotiate and you actually don't use that leverage to your advantage and you're leaving money on the table and you're potentially, some physicians are actually struggling financially and not realizing that there is something that they can do in order to decrease that struggle, and that is to negotiate.
And I want to make it clear that it's not just salary that you can negotiate.
Right.
You can negotiate a bunch of different things, including, the ability for them to restrict where you're going to practice, right? So we call that a non-compete,
right,
so to speak. So when you finish your contract or whenever you walk away from, your employment agreement, that you might be able to practice across the street, or maybe you have to go into a different town or even a different state to practice. All of that stuff is negotiable.
Yeah.
The, certain fringe benefits that you didn't think would be negotiable, maybe more of a, increase in how much goes into a 401k or how much goes into our profit sharing.
Right.
That's one thing that we did.
Yeah.
We negotiated a higher amount into our 401k. We also negotiated, we didn't have a 401k at the time with the hospital. We had something that's called a profit sharing.
Profit sharing, yeah.
The biggest thing too, particularly something that probably affects the majority of students is negotiating loan repayback. Right, that's a big deal also.
Right.
So there are plenty of things that you can negotiate outside of salary. And I think the key thing, and we're going to jump into this interview that you did with Mandy Woodruff Santos, is that, just coming out of residency, you may feel like you don't have a lot of leverage. You may feel like, okay, for the most part, you're entering into an entry-level position, right? Which is true.
Yep.
So how much can you really negotiate?
Yeah.
Well, there's room to negotiate, but the key thing is just understanding that you should negotiate if you have an opportunity to, and that as you work in the hospital and spend more time in the hospital and go on all these different committees, all of these things make you so much more attractive.
Yeah.
Not only just to the hospital that you're working at, but to other different
hospitals. And yeah, Mandy and I do talk about that. This concept of, how do you know how much you're worth as time goes by? And so she gives a few tips on how to know what you're worth as time goes by. And what people are getting paid, in kind of the same positions or with the same experience as you. So, yeah, I think this was a really great discussion that we had. I did fangirl out a little bit.
Let me do a quick introduction of Mandy. So, guys, for those who don't know, Mandy Woodruff Santos, she is co-host of the Brown Ambition podcast, who is, it's Mandy as well as Tiffany Aliche. And that's Renee's favorite podcast, even more so than Docs Outside the Box. right? As you'll find out on this show. She's a big fan of that show.
I am a big fan.
It's a really great podcast. They've gotten a whole bunch of different awards, including an award from iHeart. But Mandy is a career and money expert. She's a contributor to Yahoo Finance Live. She's been featured on the Dr. Phil show. She's been featured on the New York Times, CNBC, CNN, Business Insider, Essence, and Teen Vogue, among other things.
Yep.
So she is... she's very well
accomplished
and adept in the field of negotiation. She used to be a journalist, and actually she left, and now she's an entrepreneur. But she has a group called Mandy Makers, where she has a
Mandy Money Makers.
Sorry, Mandy Money Makers. Thank you for correcting me.
Yeah.
Mandy Money Makers, where she coaches other professional women in terms of, why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, she started Mandy Money Makers about a year ago, actually. That's when she left kind of corporate America. Started Mandy Money Makers, where she essentially provides coaching and resources for professional women. And what I really like about her business is that, you know how sometimes you see a coach or you see people and they're like, okay, here are the things that you should do. She actually provides scripts that you can use in order to be able to negotiate. So if you don't know what to say, if you know, like, man, I want to negotiate, something in my contract, she actually has scripts that you can use in order to negotiate for yourself. So let's get to the interview and check out what she had to teach us about this money trap of not negotiating. And so without further ado, me and Mandy Woodrow Santos.
Let's get into it.
It's so nice to meet you, Dr. Renee.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you. And I just love the vibe and the energy of the show. And I can't wait. I can't wait to hear what questions you have for me, because it's not every day that my OB asks me questions,
right?
Other than pee in this cup and
exactly.
Let me slather this gel all over your stomach,
all over your belly,
poke at you. Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know that, Mandy is actually expecting a little one. So we're really excited about that and hope that she has a very safe and fast delivery.
Manifest.
That's right. Manifest it. Well, thank you so much. As I mentioned, or as you mentioned, actually, you said, you had that good job, right? And so that is probably the dictum for a lot of people, right? You go to college or you don't or whatever, but you get that good job, you get that good paycheck. But
if you're lucky,
you're lucky, but you became an entrepreneur. For why? What was the point? You had that good job. What happened?
Well, I've never been one to think of myself as just being on like a linear path. Mm-hmm. I think it was because I was raised by a single mom. My parents split when I was 10. I moved schools like 4 times in 5 years. I don't know. My body just likes a little change every once in a while. Yeah. And when it came to my career, what that looked like for me was sort of being willing and okay with starting fresh at a new place. Excuse me. Oh, baby reflux. Anyway, being ready to move on and being okay with saying goodbye to one chapter and starting a new one. Like I remember even in high school when I was just thinking about this, the college rings you used to get.
Yeah.
And you would pick your symbols and all that stuff.
Right. Do they still do that?
I have no idea. Probably not.
I don't even think I got one.
Probably make your own TikTok filter now.
Right. Exactly.
But back in the day, I remember I really thought about it. I'm like, I want the symbol that means new beginnings, because so much of my life was about new beginnings and starting over.
Yeah.
And so in my approach to my career, I just was never really afraid to walk away. And I was like, I make peace with this journey and let's start a fresh one.
Yeah.
And that was a great strategy for me, especially from a wealth building perspective, because you're never in a better position to negotiate for more than when you are leaving one job and starting a new one. You're just not, when you're working the same place, you're going to get those annual, even if you're a stellar employee, maybe you'll get your 4%, if you're lucky, maybe 6, 7 with the inflation rates these days, but that's, really generous.
Right.
So I ended up quitting 6 times in 10 years for different opportunities. And so when it came to sort of the end of my corporate career, I just started to itch. I got that gut feeling, and I've learned to really trust my gut, and it's a gift that I do trust myself in that way, because for me, it was just saying, you've really done a great job. I was a manager. I was managing a team of 30 plus like 100 freelancers, and I was managing a big budget, on track to be a vice president, like all this stuff that, you know, in corporate life is like successful, you know? And at the same time, like you said, I'm trained as a writer and a journalist, and I had gotten really far away from the creative stuff, you know, from using my own voice. I was training other writers to use their voice, and I wasn't getting to really embrace mine anymore. And I was not interested. I covered personal finance and financial products and educating people about that for so long. I wanted to talk about other stuff. And thank goodness I've always had broad ambition, you know, to be that outlet for myself.
Right.
Yeah. But when I walked away, it was just, I was like, this is what the money's for. This is why I've been saving and investing, so I can take some time. Even though I got a baby, I got a mortgage, I have responsibilities.
Yeah.
I've got a little nest egg. So let me take some time, take a pause, and figure out what I want to do next. And just trust that I will find the right next step.
Yeah.
And then Mandy Money was born.
Yay.
And well, she was there all along, you know, but having the time to focus on it and think, what can I contribute as just me to the world, and what are people needing? And it's been an awesome journey.
Yeah. No, I mean, all the things that you've said, it just resonates, I think, with a lot of our listeners. We have a lot of doctors who are listeners to our podcast. And so there's you graduate from medical school, you do a residency, you get that good job, and you essentially stay, you know, at a hospital or a practice for years and years and years and years. And unfortunately, that also comes with a very big gap in the knowledge of negotiations.
Right.
And, you know, a lot of doctors, they don't even understand the leverage that they have to be able to negotiate. And part of it is because during our journey, what happens is everything is like, please, may I have some more, right? Like, please let me into your med school. Please let me into your residency program. So by the time you go to get a job, you've been trained for the last 8 years to basically be like, somebody, please give me an opportunity. And you don't realize that you are the opportunity that they have been waiting for, you know? And I think the tide is starting to change a little bit. So I love the fact that you shared with us why and how you became an entrepreneur, that mindset shift that so many people cannot, they can't see themselves going through as doctors. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that's just really important. I think for our audience to hear is that you are smart enough and you will figure it out. You don't necessarily have to be hired by someone to be able to be successful, you know?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I mean, it's really easy to, especially when you go through, you guys have so much of your career lined out. Like there's a process to become a person who can touch other humans' bodies and cure them and heal them, you know, and, you know, in contrast, my career, it was sort of like, choose your own adventure. How do you want to get here?
Yeah.
So, and I feel like it's almost militaristic the way that medical professionals, like you're just like, I get this, you know, I get promoted.
That's the perfect word.
I don't even know like what the ranks are, but like you're a soldier, then you're a captain, then a lieutenant, you know, general,
Exactly.
And you just kind of get in that motion of like catching the next thing and hitting the next mark because it's all laid out for you.
Yeah.
And it can be really disorienting when in the middle of that, when you're on like autopilot, you were like, wait, I kind of want to go this way. And that's freaking terrifying because your whole life has been, you know, on track in this way. And the pandemic has had such a massive influence.
Absolutely.
On our wonderful healthcare heroes. And what I hope has come out of that too is, one, y'all deserve to have time to find whatever path you want to be on. You don't have to follow one path. And that our, you know, and you tell me if this is right or wrong, but like our healthcare institutions, our hospitals and you know, these medical facilities really need to value your value y'all more. And you have more leverage than you think.
Maybe they'll do it if it's coming from you, because they ain't doing it coming from us.
But y'all, you have more leverage than you think, because who's going to sew us up if the people, you can't just like go, you can hire another writer
Right.
A lot sooner than you can go hire someone who's been trained for 8 years
Yeah.
to like be all up inside my uterus.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So it's like, it's exciting for me to see things like nurses strikes. We just had a big one in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And to hear that, at least in some cases, when you assert that power, you do start to see, you force the hand of the people in power to come correct. And honestly, sometimes to wake them up, you got to walk away.
That's what you got to do sometimes. It's unfortunate.
A lot of hospitals out there. It's a lot of sick people. You can go somewhere else.
It's unfortunate. Yeah, I mean, my husband and I just did an episode, speaking of striking, we just did an episode on unionizing, because some of the resident, the doctor training programs actually have unionized. I was actually part of one of the unions when I was training in New Jersey. And, that brought up the huge topic of negotiations, right? Because we always say, well, doctors, they shouldn't strike, and, therefore they shouldn't unionize it, because they're going to end up striking. And I'm like, the point of a doctor's union is so that you don't get to the point where you lose so many doctors that it's like, it's almost like you went on strike anyway, right? Like the whole point is that you need to protect doctors from just bad conditions at work. There's a lot of burnout. And so my husband asked a really good question. And it was like, listen, if your rights are being violated as an employee, as a physician, as an employee, and you walk in there alone, the chances that it's going to be corrected is going to be so much harder, right? You might have repercussions. People might resent you, and it might make your working place a hostile working place. But if you unionize, that could change a lot of things. And so that just led us down this path of talking about negotiations. And then that's when I thought about you, and I was like, we need to bring Mandy Money on here to talk about negotiations, because when I tell you, Mandy, doctors are the worst at negotiating. The absolute worst, kind of like for the reasons that I said before. And we are not immune to all of the ills of society. So, the pay gap for women also affects doctors. We as women, I think we make $2 million less over our careers, than men, So first of all, let me ask you, you pivoted from your employed job, but you started to kind of focus on negotiations. At least that's kind of what your focus is now. Is that right? Why focus on negotiations?
Because it's my superpower, in the sense that I got so much practice at it because I moved jobs so many times, and I recognized that was a skill set that I had grown and so many others have been lacking. And it was the thing that people were coming to me for. And I realized, once you start to realize this is my unique value that I can really contribute, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm the person you come to if you want to spend hours and hundreds of dollars on your resume, because I don't have time for that. And I think we overthink I was just on the news this morning talking about, I hate the resume. You're like, but you came here to tell us how to do it. I'm like, I don't care.
I don't like it.
Stop obsessing over your resumes. I know I have seen the bigger picture. I'm a product of that bigger picture, of how important your professional brand is, and to attracting higher paying opportunities, and then how to really nail it when you get to that negotiation table. So many people think that it happens, the negotiation happens when you get the contract. And I always argue that it's about the reputation that you built even years, months before, you get to that table. So by the time you get to the negotiating table, you have an opportunity to negotiate. Your value is so clear that it's not as hard. You're not fighting for it, because they're like, okay, we really want Renee. She's amazing. She's top of her field. Let's make this happen,
Right.
So really it was like listening to my clients, and I've spoken to hundreds, maybe even at this point, thousands of women. And this is what we need. So I'm like, I am here to serve.
So you mentioned building the resume, or not building the resume, but kind of building your reputation and your brands before you ever even walk through the door to, maybe even interview or get the contract. But I think a lot of doctors, especially new doctors, right, what we call residents, who are graduating out of their residency programs, they really feel like they haven't brought much to the table. But I think what I'm hearing from you is that, listen, you trained for this long, that there's something to be said for that, like that you're still acquiring a skill set and you can use that as leverage. So, talk to us about someone who's kind of fresh and new in their career and how they can approach kind of that negotiations process, even though they might feel like, I'm not really in the game long enough. I can't really negotiate on my behalf.
Yeah, 1,000%. And I mean, I want to be clear. I'm not here to like blow smoke and make people think that they can negotiate a 50% raise when you're basically entry level when you're a resident, right?
We can't, damn it.
I did. And I have seen others do that, but more advanced in their careers. The thing is now, when you are entry level, it doesn't mean that what it means is realistically, you don't have as much leverage. Like to your point, a lot of residents are graduating and they're all vying for the top programs, I'm sure, across the country. All my knowledge is based on Grey's Anatomy. So if that's not how it happens, just let me know.
That is very accurate.
Okay. So you're vying for these programs, you're like applying and stuff. You're like, like you said, pick me, choose me. Right. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you can't go in having the understanding of what your market value is, right? So I would 100% say it's important to speak amongst yourselves as residents and to, what's this place offering? What are the salary ranges? Really have a good understanding of what a reasonable entry-level salary is for a resident in your city, state, and find if there's like publicly available, sources, you can find those. But also just talking amongst yourselves. What's the culture of like medical graduates?
Ooh, girl.
Do y'all talk to each other or no?
Girl, ain't nobody talking.
Why? That's so you're hurting yourselves.
That's what we say all the time, is that in medicine, it's so competitive, right? Everything is cutthroat. So when you start out, it's like half of the people who apply to medical school will get in. So that already tells you how competitive things are. That's number one. And that culture continues in medicine. Everybody is so competitive. So that's why when you started to go down the route of talk to each other, I'm like, they ain't gonna talk to nobody. They ain't talking to nobody.
Okay. I got you though. I got you. Because early in your career, it does feel like we're all like, just emaciated street dogs, fighting over scraps. Because we are. We haven't been fed yet. We're poor. We're hungry. We are we're young. So in my career, what has helped me is always having like a step above contact. Like if you form connections, nothing is stopping you from networking with other medical professionals, even more senior, more seasoned than yourself while you're in school. You're still in these clinical environments, right? There's still people that you can connect with, leave an impression on, grab for a cup of coffee. It's a lot easier when you are a couple steps above someone in a competitive environment to be like, I'll throw them a bone, let them know what it's about, because you feel safe on your little pedestal in your perceived mind. I like psychology is fascinating. And for me, like that was very helpful, especially as I was, early in my career. And one of the first people to give me insight into salary was someone who was leaving the job that I was vying for. So I had a contact through a college internship where she was like, oh, you're applying for this job. And I said, and she was leaving. And I was like, do you know anything about the salary expectations I should have? And bet she was like, it was like 10K more than I probably would have asked for.
Wow.
Yeah. But because she was departing and she was a little bit older, like she was like, I'm going to let her know. So how can you networking laterally, like across your peers is great, but in a culture where that's not always, and I'm just being realistic. I'm sure like law school grads are similar, or anyone entry level is probably similar.
Yeah.
See about networking up and trying to make connections with people who can give you like a line of sight from their, the top of the mountain.
Yeah. So y'all hear that? Okay. Y'all need to start talking. Even the older ones need to start talking.
Honestly, when I tell you the culture will find out they're underpaid too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I worked with someone who was the chair of our department. They hired she was a female. They hired this other gentleman to come in, and he was making $50,000 more than her, like off the bat.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The power of quitting for a new opportunity, because he was a bright, shiny thing and they had to attract him. And it's not even about The gender wage gap, it does exist, right? But it's not always because they're like, this woman is worth less. I believe it is because as women, we tend to be more loyal. We want to care. We want to like stay with the place. We're getting paid less because we're negotiating from a low salary because we stick with the same job for so long.
Oh my God. I was just about to ask you all about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Whereas men are probably a little bit more, aggressive when it comes to bopping and moving around. Mm-hmm. And so naturally, because the negotiation leverage is so much higher when you are leaving for a new place, they've got to woo you, right? They know they've got to go above a standard raise if they want to get you over. But because those men have bopped around more, they end up hurt. That's how you get the 50K gap. And it's awful. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying the wage gap that bias is not involved at all, but I am saying that there's other things at play as well. And I do think that our propensity to be loyal and stagnant and stable can proliferate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I was just about to ask you about, the fact that you work mostly with women and, are women more challenged by men? And I agree with you. Women are more challenged by negotiations than men because of those things, right? Those pitfalls that they kind of fall into, I want to stay, I want to, I want to do this, I want to do that. And it's like, yeah, but you might actually be hurting yourself, at least financially, if not in other ways, because we know that, money is one thing, but there are other things that you can negotiate as well. And so a lot of times when I'm telling people to, we talk a lot about contracts here because my husband and we're actually independent contractors. I haven't been employed in 6 years, like full-time employment. I haven't been employed for like 6 years, and my husband hasn't been employed for about the same. So we talk a lot about contracts. And one of the things that I always say is that, listen, when I'm looking at a contract, compensation is literally the last thing that I look at. I want to see all the other terms because I do not want to be distracted by that big money. And just forget about everything else and then realize, wait a minute, I'm up Schitt's Creek because I got screwed over by this other clause in a contract. So I wanted to know kind of what your approach is, with your own community in terms of how you teach people about contract negotiations.
Sure. I think first and foremost, what I would say is like we spend a lot of time worrying about the thing before we actually take some steps to put ourselves in a position to have that thing to worry about.
Yeah.
So by that, I mean, I talk to some clients and they're like, oh, but if I leave such and such, and if I have this much money in savings and I have equity at my company, what if I leave and I lose it? And like, what if I can't find benefits like this somewhere else? And I love my team. And what if the next, and I'm just like, but what if? Put yourself in a position to have a choice, because right now you're just competing against a fantasy. Like you're thinking about something that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
I'm not about, it's almost, and it makes it feel like you're doing something for your career to worry about it, but you're not. So I'm really big on, let's take a step back. I'm all about, how can you position yourself so that the great opportunities find you? And so you have something to compare to where you're at now. And you really don't know what you've got until you've got something to compare it to, right? So I know I say I quit 6 times in 10 years, but it wasn't a money grab each time. I was genuinely looking for a place where I could be more professionally developed. There was something lacking where I was, and another place offered me what I thought I was missing at that time. Whether it's, I love working at a startup because it's fun and exciting and it's kind of like the Wild West and we're just a bunch of kids, kind of getting free reign. Yeah. But then you start to miss mentorship and structure. And it'd be nice if like my boss didn't show up hungover because,
or at least share the liquor.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. Yeah. And so, then I went to a bigger company and then it's like, oh, but I'm kind of stifled here, even though it's so big. I'm a small fish in a big pond. I'm not getting opportunities to grow as fast as I'd like to. And I'm ready for a senior position. So I'm going to go somewhere that's going to give me that opportunity. So like, it's always strategic and the money I think will tend to follow. But it's definitely, like you said, it's more than just the money itself. But I never would have had those opportunities. I've only applied to a job once in my career, and it was my first job. My second job, actually, I was let go from my first job, Great Recession, and I scrambled to find a new one. So I submitted applications and all that. And ever since then, it has been my reputation, my connections, my former colleagues who have reached back out to me for new opportunities, people I've met through just being active in my space and, really niching down into what I was really great at. And that can happen for so many of us, but we're not putting ourselves out there to be found. And
I mean, but how would you, what are some pointers, right? Like, what are maybe 3 pointers to put yourself out there to be found?
Oh, absolutely. I've got a really good friend of mine. She's a nurse at Stanford. Shout out to Kristen.
Yay.
I'm always afraid I'm going to get her in trouble or something. But, and I also think, and she is, sometimes I'm overwhelmed by the passion that healthcare providers that you guys have for what you do. Like, she genuinely cares and wants to help, and she works in oncology, and, she has this genuine passion. And I think that passion can sort of, you start to feel like, is it icky if I'm out here talking about myself and not the work or the patients and stuff? But one of the things that she has done is, through networking with other people in her area, she's gotten opportunities to come on a podcast like this one, where it's, medical professionals, and she can highlight her work and, what she's proud of. And she was recently nominated by a colleague for an internal award at her hospital.
Yeah.
Through her great work, and through, it's not about bragging about your good work, but making sure that other people can see it.
Yeah.
It's not just about getting acknowledged for it, but it's also, who can you inspire to raise their game?
Right.
Because of the way that, that way that you're approaching patient care and things like that. So another thing is, like, if you're in a, and I'm starting to learn more from talking to so many different people from so many different career paths, how sort of siloed different medical practices can be, medical, like, specialities, like OBs, for example. You guys have, y'all may have a specific membership organization. You may have specific conferences you can go to, specific podcasts that talk about, your niche.
Right.
And how can you show up in those places? And what point of view can you share with those people and start to make connections? You just want to be intentional about the rooms that you're putting yourself in, whether it's maybe writing an article for even your alma mater for rising graduates,
right?
Going back and speaking on a panel, where you went to medical school.
Absolutely.
Or working with nonprofits to go into the community and spread the word about maternity, wellness or whatever. Putting yourself out there, doing the work.
Yeah.
But you're also getting the name out there, right?
Right.
Even with your podcast, this is a great way to broadcast to the world. I do this particular type of healthcare. Holla,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really important, because I think a lot of doctors think work, put in the work, and eventually somebody will just notice. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. you have to do some other things.
Patient.
Yeah, you're going to have to do other things. You're going to have to put yourself out there. And, it can be daunting. A lot of doctors are like leery of social media. They don't like social media. I'm like, well, first of all, that's where your patients are.
Yes.
And secondly, you have a lot of colleagues out there as well, including those organizations that you've mentioned as well. I mean, they're all over social media. So I don't know why there are still some doctors who are anti-social media, but, it is what it is.
If you are happy, some people are just happy doing what they're doing, and they're comfortable, and that's fine for them. But it doesn't mean that the rest of us have to operate in the same way. And like, to your point, the way to connect with consumers today and to educate them, like, social media can be such a great platform for that.
Yeah.
But at the bare minimum, like, I don't really consider LinkedIn a traditional social media site. Like, I feel like people need to stop sleeping on LinkedIn in the sense that they're like, oh, well, I'm going on a social media cleanse, so I'm going to turn off TikTok and IG and LinkedIn. But I'm like, no, not your LinkedIn.
Yeah, not your LinkedIn. Yeah.
Stay in the conversation with professionals, because, and I have to think in medical professionals too, so many opportunities can come through word of mouth, and if you are reminding people that you exist, which is what you do when you like their post or you comment or you share something.
Right.
And if they have had a good experience with you, can't be a jerk out there and expect people to want to work with you.
Exactly.
Then it's just more likely, again, that you're going to be in a position to make a kind of choice that could put you in a position for a better opportunity and better pay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just have one more question. It's actually a question from an audience member of ours. And I figured, I was like, well, since I have her here, I'll have her answer this question.
Yeah.
So, being in the medical profession, oftentimes, we encounter situations when we're contracting or when we're negotiating contracts. Are we being too aggressive? Is everything negotiable? What about non-compete clauses? And then obviously, is my salary, the same as someone else's or more or less? And so our listener, Manisha, she said let's see, what does it say? I just listened to episode 301, where it was mentioned toward the end of the episode that anyone can go to HR and ask what the top salary for someone doing the same work/job. Is the employer actually required by law to disclose the salary and or any of those other things that I mentioned, like non-compete clauses or, other things that might be negotiable?
Employment law is, and I'm not an employment law attorney, but I know it's often different state by state. I haven't heard that, employers are obligated to tell you if you ask them what the top paid employee is. Maybe that's true, but I don't actually know. Do you know?
I think there are some states. I think New York just pass something that says that they have to actually disclose a range?
Yeah, that's different. So now in like 20 states, they have salary pay transparency laws in place that require employers of a certain size to disclose on job listings what the salary, like a reasonable salary range. And so, yes, New York just passed that, New York City, I believe.
Right.
So, yeah, it can be very different from state to state. But if you're just someone who really wants to understand, am I being underpaid, compared to my peers? If you don't feel comfortable going directly to your peers, I would start looking outside, who can help me? Who can I just be transparent with? Here's what I'm making. Here's my experience. What do you think? Am I being underpaid? But my favorite way, and it's for y'all who are like, we don't talk to each other. This is awkward as hell. One of the best ways to get a market analysis for yourself is to take job interviews. Yeah. Again, it's about positioning yourself so opportunities can find you so that you can do fact finding. You can do get some real data. If you're not interested in leaving, I was always interviewing. Keep your interview skills sharp. You never know where recruiters are going to end up and if you may want that contact down the line. But even more so, what's your salary range? And then you can get a sense of, wow, okay, I could be making more, or I'm doing okay.
Right.
So that's another reason why I love the idea of just stop obsessing over, other things. Just position yourself to get noticed and get attention from hiring managers, recruiters, so you can be in a position to get opportunities and find out what could be out there.
Right. So always be looking.
ABL, that's my
ABL, always be looking.
Yep, exactly.
Well, thank you so much, Mandy. I so appreciate having this conversation with you. I'd love to, be able to have our audience find you. Just let us know where they can find you, what you're offering right now. I think it would be a great help to our physician community, because let me tell you something, they need help.
Listen, and hey, if you want to talk to each other, talk to me, and then I'll tell y'all what y'all be saying. Okay,
there you go. Exactly. You know what she has said.
That's where my journalism skills come in. I'll find a quote.
That's right.
So you can go to mandymoney.com. It's Mandy with an I, to find out all about what I do. But I offer a free negotiating masterclass, and you can go to nailyournegotiation.com. Nail with an N. yournegotiation.com to register. I do them pretty regularly. So if you just missed one, there'll be another one probably not long after. I do them live. I do Q&A, and they're so fun. And if you want to find out more about me, I also have a career coaching community, because to the point about connections and having different voices in your ear telling you things are possible, we need support and community. So through Mandy Moneymakers, I'm able to offer that. There's an on-demand course. There's also group coaching, and I'm really proud of building that community. It's only been around for a year, and it's just been phenomenal.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. Oh, absolutely. Thanks so much. It's been really exciting to just kind of hear you and Tiff talk on Brown Ambition. My husband's always like, "Do you like their podcast better than you like mine?" I'm like, "Stop being jealous." Let me call Mandy and Tiff and see what they're doing. You're not calling them, you're listening to their podcast. It's a conversation, okay?
It is.
So I'm so excited to see where Mandy Moneymakers goes from here. I know it's, you've had your 1-year anniversary and it's been really, really successful. So I'm really excited to just watch how much you grow. So thanks again for coming on. And we look forward to hearing more from you soon.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed this episode. Obviously, you were fangirling in this episode, but you did a good job. So how did it feel doing your first interview for the show, actually, on your own?
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. It was kind of weird not having you there.
You held your own, though. I give you that. You held your own.
It was very interesting not having you there. But yeah, no, I thought it was, very insightful of her to, come up with those tips to be able to help people kind of just, go through the process.
What's up with quitting 6 times in 10 years? Damn.
Yeah, that was a lot, right?
She knows how to walk away.
Yeah, she knows how to walk away. But, I think there's something to be learned in that, right? I think oftentimes people are very scared to walk away from something, especially when they're like, well, no, this paycheck is coming and, I know it's coming and I'm used to this and I like the people that I work with. But if there is something missing, if there's something better out there that you want, don't be afraid to go after it. And I think that was the lesson that I got from that. Quitting 6 times in 10 years. It's a lot, but look at her now.
What I got from it was, the biggest thing I got from it is that I think the residents, the fellows, people who are just starting, like I said earlier before, you may think that you don't have much to negotiate, but I want you guys to listen to what she said. She said you have to do other things to separate yourself. This could occur while you're in training, or this can occur while you are starting that first job. Right. Start a podcast, do some work on social media, do some volunteering, get some extra training, get on some committees. All of these things are going to make you that much more attractive to the hospital, as well as attractive to other programs and other places that you want to work. Talk among your colleagues. That's a number one thing that we don't do. So you can't do that to everybody. You can't talk with everybody.
You can't tell everybody.
But you got to find a small group of people. I have a group of people who literally, whenever I get a new contract with locums and I get my rates, I talk with this person and we exchange so that we know, okay, listen, you're taking too cheap, or yeah, you should take more. Because we know, we treat it like sports. If one person rises up, that means we all rise up.
Right.
As opposed to the crabs in the barrel bucket, which is, well, if this person is making $100 an hour, well, maybe I should be able to do it for $50 an hour. It's like, dumb. You don't do that, right?
You don't do that, yeah.
But people,
devaluate yourself.
A lot of times we do that. So you have to be really careful with who you talk with. And just because I gave you that example doesn't mean that you should hold the cards to your chest. It just means that the more we share and the more you share with the right people, I think overall the tide will rise for everyone. Yeah. And we'll get better rates, better working conditions, what have you.
Yeah. So. And then, to answer kind of that question from Manisha about, whether or not you could go to HR. So if you go to HR, right, you can't ask, like, how much is that person making, right? Like, a job is not necessarily allowed to tell you how much a person is making, but there are transparency laws, and there are several states. New York is one of them, at least. California, I know, is one of them.
A lot of them.
There are quite a number of states that require that jobs, are transparent with the range of salary for the position that you are either in or even have interviewed for, right? So you could have interviewed, as long as you've interviewed for the position, you can actually ask what the salary range is. And there are now laws. I think New York has actually said that they have to post it.
Yeah. Some states, so Nevada has it, New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut, Colorado. Basically what this means is if I'm a trauma surgeon, if I'm looking for a job, if I go and interview, depending on which state I go to, I can literally ask the employer, okay, for a trauma surgeon, what is the lowest salary that you're going to pay versus what's the highest, like give me a range so that okay, well, yeah, whatever they give you or whatever they're offering you, where in the spectrum you fall, and that gives you room to negotiate. So I think it's mad important. And then for the new, I'm all about the new entry level. We call them entry level, but the new residents or the residents who are running into or jumping into a job. Listen, I know it's tough to have leverage But listen, I think it's really important. Once again, I say this: negotiate other things than salary.
Right.
Yeah, negotiate student loan payback. Negotiate more CME. Negotiate more vacation. Negotiate some other fringe benefits that you think that are not negotiable, that are very important.
Absolutely.
I would say definitely negotiate that.
Yeah.
So, and with that, I think we're going to end this episode. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you go and you click on the links where you can find more about Mandy, as well as if you're interested in learning more about transparency laws. I put a bunch of links in the show notes for you to click about what state, has these transparency laws and how to ask. And there's even something from the federal government that I have in there also. And also, last but not least, if you want to let us know what you think, text us at 833-230-2860 so that we can communicate and find out what you like and what you don't like. And that's about it.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. We will catch you guys on the next episode, y'all.
Peace.
Peace.